Okay. Our next segment is called Insight Development.
Okay.
All right. Okay. As you know, I have a dog and I like to go
Yes,
walking with
indeed.
my dog. And I record anytime an insight occurs to me, I record it into my phone and I just put it away for a rainy day. And today I'm going to bring two of them back. The first insight, we're going to listen to it together. It's on the topic of opinions.
Mm.
And I feel strongly about this topic in terms of debating, but it's a very short insight. Let's listen to it first and then chat about it. People are not entitled to their opinions. Rather, people's opinions are a symptom of their entitlement.
Mm.
It's
Ooh.
like a chiasmus, right? It's
Ooh,
not the life
interesting.
in my teachers, it's the teachers in my life. Chiasmus.
Yes.
A lot of wisdom appears in this form called chiasmus, but
Yes.
that thought occurred to me because I was listening to an interview with Leonard Cohen, the
Oh, yes,
brilliant
he's everywhere these days.
Canadian, right? Montreal, Leonard Cohen. And he was very, I guess, a recluse. And he
Mm.
didn't give many interviews. And he only started talking to people in public when he was running out of money. I think he mismanaged his money towards the end of his
Mm.
life and he needed to make some public appearances. And one of the things I remember, it stood out to me, he said, the reason I'm quiet and reticent and don't talk to people is because our opinions are useless. They're
Mm.
just people. It's a blah blah. It doesn't take a great deal of thought to form an opinion, and kind of like what this, Plato said that opinions are the medium between knowledge and ignorance.
Mm.
And so, in terms of debating, I can't trust an opinion to be a valid debating argument because it might be closer to ignorance.
Mhm.
So that's why I always teach the kids leave your opinions at home and we'll bring something more valuable to the table, insight. What's your thought?
Yeah, I think that this is a tough one because on the one hand, I agree, you can't step out of your own subjective experience, right? We're all just sort of trapped in our heads. And how do we know that what we think isn't just a product of, I don't know, our own circumstances, our own conditions, our own experiences? But at the same time, what do we have if we don't have our opinions? Um, I'd be interested to hear how you distinguish opinion and insight. But from what I feel about this, I think that if we don't trust our own instinct or our own analysis or our own, thoughts, then what do we have left? Because if we understand that
Well,
all knowledge that we have is sort of trapped inside of our own
the way I
subjective.
distinguish it is by saying if you actually substantiate your opinion and do some thinking
Mm-hmm.
about it and qualify it, then it becomes a position. And there's nothing wrong
Okay.
with having a position. Like if you have a position, that means you can defend it. But
Mm-hmm.
opinions are too loosey goosey. And I think our opinions can easily change unless it becomes our qualified position.
Yes, that's, I think, a very interesting one. I'd taken a bioethics class where the professor on the first day, looking through the syllabus, had said that in bioethics, of course, we have analysis, we draw on all kinds of philosophy and all sorts of analytic traditions, but you've got to leave space for what he called the ick, you know? And that sometimes you'll just look at a situation and you can't quite put your finger on why this rubs you the wrong way, but there's a gut feeling of ick. And then from there, you can judge, well, is this just because of some sort of cultural bias? Is this because of, you know, this particular tradition telling me that this is wrong? Or is there some other level that's operating here that makes us feel from a sort of inherent human position that there's something unethical about this?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Which I
All
thought was
right, let's move on
interesting.
to the next
Yeah.
one. This next insight, I call it no regrets. Now, listen, it's a little
Mm.
bit lengthier. Let's listen. To those who have no regrets because they're so pleased with how they turned out, I'm going to rain on your parade. Why is the person who you are today the perfect culmination of everything that has happened to you, every decision that you've made? It's pretending you're perfect, infallible. Now, I think anyone with an ounce of introspection will find plenty of fault with who they are today. And they can identify lots of places in their life where their life went off rails. And if they had made better choices, they wouldn't be in a feeble-minded delusion today where they believe they are perfect. Okay, maybe a little bit
Mhm.
harsh. I don't know if did I have somebody in mind? Well,
Hmm.
I do remember when I was Megan, I was teaching debating in prison at the
Yes.
Toronto South Detention Center, and I was actually in the solitary confinement, like under the prison. And
Mhm.
one of my students was this guy with an orange jumpsuit. He had tattoos all over his face and his head. And this topic came up about regrets. And I remember he made this big old speech about how I have no regrets because if I regretted anything, then I wouldn't be the man who I am today. This kind of like that
Yeah.
cliche, what everybody says. And I remember looking at the guards saying,
Again, I hope
thinking,
not.
are is it just me or this guy is in
Yeah.
the prison under the prison and he's talking about the man in any case. So what do you think about regrets and having no regrets?
Hmm. Even if I don't completely agree with that guy's position, I appreciate being able to look at your circumstances and say that, I own this and I understand all of the things that got me to this position today. And I'm
Mm.
okay with myself now, which means that I have to learn to be okay with what I've done.
So it's
And I
kind
think
of
that's
like a form of like loving yourself or accepting yourself.
yeah,
If you can
yeah, I
appreciate
think
who you are
so.
today, it doesn't mean you're perfect. It just means that I accept. I've come to kind of to terms with myself. Is that what you
Yeah, I
mean?
guess it gets to the question of like, what does it mean really to regret something? Does it mean that you wish you hadn't done it? Does it mean that you're sorry for it, but you know that if you had no other choice, like, can you regret something
Do
where
you
you
think it's
didn't
in
have a
our, it's in
choice?
our nature to regret? Do you think it's like a built-in mechanism that all humans have?
I think so. I think so. I mean, it's hard to make a big universal, everybody feels this for everybody doesn't kind of statement, but I think, everybody must look back and say, well, I wish I'd done that a little bit
But if
differently.
that's true, Megan, isn't there a reason that we all have regret then? Isn't it then?
Mm,
Can we say there's no regrets if it's built into our DNA? I mean, isn't it some kind of safety mechanism or a check and balance that makes sure like if we regret something, that teaches us not to do that thing again, and
yeah,
somehow it
to
helps
help
us
us be
survive or
better.
preserves us.
Yeah, I think that's a good point that by looking back, by having this ability to reflect, it helps us to look forward as well and say, well, I wouldn't have done that uh, in the past. Like, I wish I hadn't done that. So I know that I'm not going to do that in the future.
All
So is
right.
it possible to think about your future without thinking about your past? Maybe not.
How about in your young life? Any big regrets? You don't have to say them, but I'm wondering if you have any.
You know, not really. I can't say no regrets. I'm sure that there are little small things, but there's been no huge decision that I can think of where I'm like, "Ah, I wish I'd done that differently." Because I think by being happy where you are now, you have to recognize that all of those things were part of the path.
Yeah. And maybe also like all of life is a big learning curve and we have to
Yeah.
go through the mistakes and we have to, facing your mistakes. I'm a big fan of that, of facing your challenges and
Hmm.
because they're stepping stones to your goals. And so, you can't regret having a falling down or having a mistake because
Hmm.
that mistake made you more resilient and able to face a worse problem later.
Yeah, and you got to be able to empathize with yourself in the past too, right? So you can look back at a decision and in hindsight, hindsight 2020, you can say, oh, well, I shouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have done that if I could do it again.
Yeah.
But we've got to trust that in those moments, you were making the best decision that you could.
Yeah.
And if we believe that in those moments, we had looked at our options and we had picked the one that we thought was best at the time, then, how can you blame your past self for that?
Right. It's kind of like being your own best friend, which I love that idea as
Yeah.
well. All right. Thank you, Megan. Wonderful.